Welcome everybody. Good evening. Are we ready? Okay, very good. So I don't know if everybody knows me. My name is Fabio Schulthess. I am from Switzerland. I'm a retired airline pilot for Lufthansa German airline, and I've been flying in Sugarbush for the last 22 years with my Piper Pacer, and this year I planned to fly to Alaska. This was a dream I was having with a friend of mine, Axel from Germany. He has a carbon cup. We wanted to do this last year, but then we postponed it for this year because we had stuff going on. And so tonight it's the presentation of my trip to Alaska. So why does a guy who is 66 and the other guy is 70 want to do this at their age, fly to Alaska with all this, the hassle and all that stuff? Well, why did we do it? Because we can. And then you never know with the health, at this age, the health issues, you never know if the doctor suddenly tells you you cannot fly anymore, so you better do it while you're still in good shape. So that's why we elected to do this 6-week trip, and the preparation was enormous. I must have spent like 40 hours on my computer at home here across the runway, where I have my vacation home, and it was so much to do and so much information I had to get from other friends, like Canada, immigration United States. So you have to file a EAPIS for the Americans, a form, very badly designed. The form. I almost cried when I had to fill out this form. It was so bad, a couple of times. And then little things like you need a sticker on your airplane from the CBP, Custom Border Protection. That sounds like a tiny little thing, that sticker, but you pay $35, then it comes. And the sticker is so badly made, it took us like 15 minutes to get that sticker off the, and then put it on the airplane, because if you don't pay attention, it will break, So that was quite just annoying stuff with that, And then we needed, for the Canadians, you have to have a so-called ETA, stupid word, because ETA in aviation means estimated time of arrival. No, it's electronic travel authorization. You better have that number with you all the time. You better know when you arrived in the country, because I'm here on a visa, which is only good for 6 months a year. So you better know, it's called the I-94, so you better know what you are dealing with when you cross the border, Canada, you put them back to the United States, which we had to do twice. Because first into Canada, then Alaska, which is US, then back to Canada, and then another time in the US. So it's 4 border crossings. So the preparation was enormous, and then the logistics, like where there's fuel available, it's very hard nowadays. I flew a similar route like 45 years ago. It was absolutely no problem with fuel. There was much more going on with aviation. But in these days, it's very hard to preparation. So we finally got our way going. So preparing for the trip, everybody knows that. Braden, where's Braden? He did that picture with the drone. Thank you again. Very nice. So I removed the back bench, the back seat of my airplane on the left side, and then I started filling up with all the bags. It was, I didn't have a weight problem, and I didn't have a volume problem. Axel with his carbon cup had more a volume problem, so I actually took some of his bags into my airplane. So because my airplane has 4 seats and Axel only has 2 seats. So here we go. How does this go? It's my takeoff. You can see how loaded I was on the 22nd of July. Leaving for Oshkosh. We flew first to Oshkosh on the way to Alaska. It matched the time. So you see, I barely get over the hill there. Oshkosh is Wisconsin. That's the That's the biggest air show in the world. 10,000 airplanes. This year about 700,000 visitors. By the way, when you have a question, raise your hand and interrupt me. I forgot to tell you that at the briefing. So the thing was first to Oshkosh, spent a couple of days in Oshkosh, and then, since we already have 10 hours flying westbound, continue to Alaska.
Might as well.
So crossing Lake Michigan, 45 minutes over the water. You can see here, that's the route I flew here. I took the shortest route over the water and put the life vest on because I was, how do you say chicken? Chicken. So Oshkosh, the arrival, runway 27, the campsite, the flight line, vintage aircraft camping, again 10,000 airplanes. And about 85 degrees temperature, very, very hot. Wow. And then I was able to stay with Father Bill and another Father Bill, the gentleman back there. So I didn't have to camp. I was able to stay at the priest's house. So it's good to have connections to the church. Then on the 28th of July, we left Oshkosh for Alaska. Here I'm in the line, trying to get out of Oshkosh. And here start the first weather issues. You see the weather radar I have on my foreflight. That posed some challenges. How am I going to fly? And as you can tell, you see the little arrows which shows where the weather is moving. And so these were a couple of challenges we had to go through on the way to Alaska. So that's a fuel stop, Burnett County, Wisconsin. Then again, weather issues, now cockpit view. This is my built-in instruments. On the other side, you see my iPad. I was able to fly through the green stuff, so it wasn't that bad. We were below the bad stuff. As you can see, for the pilots, that's my communication, my radio. This is my transponder with weather, and this is my GI, the Garmin 175, my navigation unit, plus my iPad as a backup. That was very important. The iPad works fantastic in the United States. Wait until we get into Canada. That's Grafton, North Dakota fuel stop. I really liked the airport cat. They said there was a sign at the door, don't let the cat in, she's okay. There was a big sign, don't feed the cat, don't let it in. And then we had the first night stop in Rolla, North Dakota, and we didn't have a courtesy car. Some airports supply a courtesy car. It's free. You just put $10 in for the fuel or so. Just leave some money in the car, or with the guy who gives the car. And so we had an airport car, which was extremely handy because Rolla, North Dakota, pretty remote. I choose that airport because it's very close to the Canadian border. And when you fly into Canada, you have to tell them exactly what time you're arriving. You only have 15 minutes of space. If you don't do that, if you don't hold the 15 minutes, you get yelled at. So that's why I wanted to be as close as possible to the border so I can hold on to the ETA which I calculated. Of course, you have to call them, you have to file an EAPIS. We spent 2 hours in the hotel room just filing the EAPIS the evening before. And so you really have to plan and be very disciplined with the planning. So we arrived at the hotel like at 7:30 and the restaurant closes at 8. We just made it in time to have dinner at the hotel just before they closed. That was nice. And this is the breakfast. I don't know how to say this in English. In German it's übersichtlich. That's about it. Just coffee, terrible coffee, and just a little bit of cornflakes. And Axel and I, we're European. We are very, very into good cappuccino in the morning. I go nuts if I don't have my coffee. It's the same thing with him. So that coffee, I don't even look at it because I will have to go to the toilet after this. Very bad. So I said, let's see if we can find a better coffee place. And then we went to a gas station and to see if there's coffee there, forget it. And then I Googled, where's the next Starbucks? It's 142 kilometers away. The Canadians are in kilometers. That's 88 miles. So when I asked the gas station guy, where's the next Starbucks? He started laughing. I've never seen somebody laugh so hard. Are you not? Well, we are from Europe, we need to go coffee. So no coffee that day. And then we flew to Canada, to Brandon, Manitoba, and this is the border crossing. You can actually see the road, tiny little border crossing for the cars. And then we landed in Brandon, Manitoba, customs, to do the immigration. You have to call the Canadians by phone. And then I realized my phone doesn't work. I have an American AT&T prepaid phone, and that thing didn't work. So, and you're not allowed to leave the airplane. How do you get help? You're stuck in the airplane, you're not allowed to leave. So I waved at Axel, but he was on the phone himself. And then I had to change my phone to my Swiss phone, and it cost me like $46 to call the immigration Canada to get the permit number. They give you a permit number, you have to write that down, and you also should write down the badge number, the name of the man or the lady, whoever picks up the phone. And I didn't have my ETA ready, the electronic travel authorization. I got yelled at so bad, she almost didn't let me come in. But then I found my ETA, called back, and then after about 35 minutes sitting in my airplane, she released me and gave me an admission number to get into Canada. And then we jumped out of the airplane and fueled up. So the next stop was Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Very nice hotel. I have to say that Axel always took care of the hotels. That was a financially very nice of him, you know. And he likes nice hotels. So that was where we spent the night. And then instead of Mexican dinner, we really had a nice dinner there, as you can tell. Being European, we really like good food, you know, and the coffee is the most important thing, actually. So, Canada life, self-explanatory. In the morning, there was nothing going on. I'm surprised, it's a big city. Saskatoon, nothing going on the next morning. Then we flew to Whitecourt, Alberta. We usually flew about 2.5 hour legs. The longest day was 6.5 hours of flying time. No autopilot, flying by hand on a small plane with the headset on. It's tiring, I tell you guys. Sometimes I went to bed at 9:30, I was so dead, and slept like 9 hours without getting up. And then of course we needed coffee. We had no car, and so Axel forced me to, he's a jogger and my marathon guy. I just watch marathon on TV. So we walked 25 minutes just to get a nice coffee at Starbucks, and then 25 minutes back to the hotel, and then get a taxi to the airport. And I said, why don't we take a taxi on the way to the airport and stop at Starbucks? No, you need to exercise. Well, I lost 10 pounds on that trip, by the way. Okay, then we're starting to have some weather issues of some low clouds here. Then Dawson Creek, British Columbia, fuel stop. You can tell by the clouds, it doesn't look very promising back there. That's Axel's airplane. You see the dark clouds in the back there. And then we tried to fly to Fort Nelson, British Columbia. So we tried to fly from here up there, and then there was this. The weather issues. It didn't look good at all. Low clouds. And then we turned around to Dawson. We turned around and went to Fort St. John, British Columbia. British Columbia, there was a NOTAM also by air traffic control. There were firefighters, and they closed the airspace exactly where we wanted to go. There was a hole where the weather was acceptable, but exactly this airspace was closed. We had to divert. And then we spent 3 days in driving rain in Fort St. John. And then we ended up renting a car so we can move around. Then we finally kept on going. Watson Lake, that's finally Yukon. Now we're really getting close to Alaska. Then the weather was bad again, there was forest fires and pretty bad visibility. You have no weather briefing, you have to call the flight service station and get a weather briefing like 50 years ago. And then you lose contact with ATC after 20 minutes and you're all by yourself for 2 hours without knowing what's going on. The foreflight doesn't work anymore, no more radar coverage, nothing. It's really looking out of the window and just flying like in the old days.
Did you know that going there?
I didn't know that it didn't work. So my phone didn't work, the foreflight didn't work. That was quite a surprise. Now I know it. If I do this again, I'm prepared. I know that. Be prepared for it, you know. I got the phone working later on by calling AT&T, and for $10 a month, I was getting the Canadian extension, but I didn't know that because my phone worked in Montreal, for instance. It works perfectly. Montreal is Canada. Why doesn't it work in British Columbia? It doesn't work. So I learned a couple of lessons. So that's what we went through, mountains, you know, your eyes are glued on your map, how long, you're counting the miles to get to Whitehorse. And then we finally made it, Whitehorse, 9 o'clock in the evening, it doesn't get dark until 11. And then we were very happy we made it to Whitehorse. And then all restaurants closed, of course, get a taxi, stop at the gas station, get a sandwich, eat the sandwich at the hotel room. But then we had good coffee in the morning, thank God. And then we did the EAPIS thing and flew back to the United States, doing customs in Northway. And again, that was a 2.5-hour flight and I had to be there within 15 minutes. That was really tough, you know, to time it. Then the wind changed to a headwind and I was 7 minutes late, but it wasn't that bad. The guy was waiting there in his CBP. The CBP officer was waiting there and asked a whole bunch of questions, why we are here. And when you land, you're not allowed to leave the airplane, you're allowed to open the door. And then he comes with a machine and measures the radioactivity of the airplane because they're scared of a dirty bomb. So yeah, well, just did that. And then we were in Alaska, and then we went to visit a Swiss pilot who flew for Swiss Air, who has a log cabin in Alaska. So he lives the same lifestyle the way I live here in Vermont with my house over there. He lives in Chisana. That's his private airstrip. So we landed there, and that's his log cabin. That's where we spent 2 nights, Chisana. Very nice with the mountains and everything. You will see that later.
And that's
Arthur. Say again?
How was the coffee?
The coffee, he was from Switzerland. He did perfect coffee, better than Starbucks. I have to say that. Very good cook, you know. He's actually holding a cocktail there. His kitchen was organized, incredible, just a log cabin, but very, very nice. So Arthur really saved our morning coffee desire. So that's the evening sun in Chisana. The view from his dining table, isn't that great? Look straight at the airplane. Fantastic. He has a Cessna 180. And then the next day, he took us for a ride around the glaciers with his 180. I was in the back seat, Axel, because he's like 9 feet tall. He was sitting in the front seat.
So what month is this?
That's the month.
When was this?
That's the Sankt Elias, how do you say this? St. Elias? St. Elias Range. Yeah, St. Elias Range. These are the glaciers.
Did you land on the glacier?
No, we didn't land. No, he had wheels. He didn't have skis on that day. He does it with skis once in a while. So this is just a short clip. Very, very spectacular. We were flying at about 11,000 feet. I didn't see many animals. We were surprised how little animals we saw on this trip. We only saw 1 caribou, no moose, no bear, a couple of mountain sheep. That's all. So that's again the St. Elias Range. and then we flew to McCarthy. McCarthy, there's a mine there, so it was a 1.5 hour walk through the forest, bear infected, and we didn't have a bear spray. And there was people coming towards us, walking to the airport, and they asked, "Do you have a bear spray?" I said, "No, but I have a mosquito spray." So that made me a little bit nervous when local people ask, "Oh, you should have a bear spray." We didn't have one, but thank God we didn't see a bear. So we spent like 3 hours walking through bear-infected area from the airport to the lodge and back.
The bears will thank you for this mosquito spray.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, then we had lunch there, a beautiful, the Kennicott Lodge in the middle of nowhere. Look at the luxury, with tablecloths and everything. We had lunch there. And then we left. Arthur went back north, and we flew to Eagle, Alaska, on the Yukon River, which is very close to the Yukon territory of Canada. And on the way up there, flying northbound, there's a funny little city called Chicken, Alaska. I liked the name. Really funny, Chicken. And then we landed in Eagle, quite windy, Eagle, Alaska. And that's the courtesy card. There's only one hotel there. He only accepts cash. Thank God we had cash. We were prepared for this. And he gave us this very old van. We were very happy to have transportation. We were the only hotel guests. And then I met my old friends from 1978 when I had a short stint in Alaska. That's Gary and Yvonne. They're both 84 years old. Met them there, and they invited us to dinner because there's no restaurant, thank God. We had them, otherwise it would have been granola bars. And that's me in 1978, and then in 2023, I flew that Super Cup, and Gary bought that Super Cup back in 1978, and then I was in Europe for an airline career, so you see how I looked like in 78, and 45 years later. And it's the same airplane. He still has the same airplane, which I flew back in 1978, and of course, he let me fly it. How do I get this going? So that's me taking off in the Super Cup, which I used to fly 45 years ago. I still know how to fly that thing. That was fun. Very emotional for me, you know, after 45 years.
You're old.
I was old? I was 22 then. So he let me fly the plane. That was very nice. He hasn't seen me in 45 years and just believed me that I can fly the Super Cup.
Fold him. Beautiful.
Okay, that's the view from the hotel room. You can see the smoke. That's the Yukon River, by the way. And you can see the smoke from the forest fire. So it's a beautiful day, but the visibility gets so limited with the smoke. Here again, Yukon River, beautiful view. And then we flew from Eagle via Tok, Golcana fuel stop to Anchorage.
How much is fuel?
That's, say again, fuel, the cost? About $9 to $10 a gallon. 8.75, 9. So that's towards Anchorage, the Matanuska Glacier, beautiful.
It's like car fuel in Switzerland.
Car fuel? It's like car fuel in Switzerland, yes. Yeah. And then we finally landed in rain showers in Birchwood, Alaska, where we based our airplane for the next week. Stayed there. Then we met another Swiss pilot, that's Felix. He kind of lives in this hangar in a car, and he also has a 180. He was a passenger, I met him. He was my passenger when I flew the Boeing to Whitehorse, Yukon. In the old days, I flew the Boeing 767 to Whitehorse, Fairbanks, and Anchorage about 20 years ago. And we had like 7-day layovers in Anchorage. And he had his airplane there, and he went to the cockpit, and we met and talked and stayed in contact ever since, so I visited him. He does the same like me here in Vermont. He spends the summers in Alaska, like I spend it in Vermont. He's also retired now. And then, as you can tell, it was raining like hell. But we had Arthur's car. Arthur had a car in Anchorage, and he lent us his car. And then we were driving around. That's Lake Hood, Anchorage, the biggest seaplane base of the world. And then we took a trip to the glacier. That's the Roos Glacier. Axel, I always flew ahead of Axel, but he had a fantastic GoPro camera mount. So he's filming and I'm flying in front of him. This video is a little bit long. Let me... So that's entering the Roos Glacier. You see the weather is, it's okay, you could see something, you can always turn around. It was absolutely spectacular to fly up that glacier. So we flew quite a bit up into the glacier. That's very impressive. So we stopped in Talkeetna and asked the local pilots how it is up there. And in Talkeetna there is these air tours. They fly in groups, like 6 airplanes take off at the same time with 7, 8 passengers. They all fly in groups up to the glaciers and then come back, and then we picked a time where we were all by ourselves. So I always ask the local pilots for advice, always. Even with my experience, I always want to know from local guys what to do and what not to do. So now it's getting around the corner there.
Had you been there before?
Yeah, not at the Roos Glacier, not at the Roos Glacier. If you have good eyes, you can see me. I cannot see myself. I'm zooming around back there. Scary. But we weren't that high. It's only a couple thousand feet. It's not that high actually. But if the weather was good, you could see Mount McKinley, or Denali, as they call it today. Back there, we were only 8 miles from Denali. Very impressive how it goes back there. It's more impressive than Switzerland, I have to say.
How fast did you guys go? What's your speed?
We were flying at 100 knots, which is 120 miles an hour. So here comes the next one. That's now really flying into the glacier. Again at 120 miles an hour. There was no wind, very calm, practically no bumps. You cannot do this when it's very windy. I would never do this with 30 knots of wind, you know. So that's getting really spectacular there, flying all the way there and then back. Of course, you should know how much space you need to turn around. But it was absolutely no problem to turn around. Absolutely no problem. We had to turn around back there. Yeah, let me finish the video clip as we do the turn. We couldn't get any closer. It would be nice to see Mount McKinley, but it's covered in the clouds. But still, it was very spectacular to fly up that glacier. So now comes the 180 turn. You don't talk to anybody, you're just all by yourself. Until we fly back to Glacier where we came from.
Are you still in front somewhere?
You're still in
Are
front.
you still in front somewhere?
I'm still in front. I was always in front, always. Of course, with that video, it's very hard to see that tiny little airplane of mine. I was like 2 miles in front.
Beautiful.
That's exiting the glacier. I'm always way to the right, over there, very close to these rocks. Because in the Swiss Alps, I learned to fly to the right, so you have enough space to turn around. That's a mountain flying technique which you should adhere to. Right, Tom? Where's Tom? Right? Yeah, that's only a short clip. And you see blue sky back there, that's towards Talkeetna. Then we flew back towards Talkeetna, and you will see what we did. So these were day trips we did on nice days from Anchorage. We were always based in Anchorage, staying in hotels. A hotel room in Anchorage, by the way, at the high season, $450 a night. It's ridiculous how expensive that is. And then I visited Eddie Trimmer in Willow. He's the pacer guru. He's the #1 guy. He has all the STCs. That means modification rights for Piper Pacers, which is my airplane. So I visited him. I visited him when I had a layover in Anchorage with 7 days, and he remembered. That was so funny. I had a couple of flight attendants with me, young ladies, and he took them up for an airplane ride, and that was 20 years ago. And he still remembered the name of each flight attendant. He's 80 now. He thought, oh, it was Simon, it was the... I totally forgot, you know. He remembered all names of the 3 flight attendants he took up for an airplane ride on one of my layovers. And here is, we went to Squentna. That's not too difficult an airport, but that's gravel takeoff, and that's where I nicked my prop. So I had to repair my prop a little bit, nothing bad, but the gravel is very nice to land in, but it's not good to the prop. And then we continued towards Fairbanks and stopped in Cantwell, not really as a necessity, just to land there. It was a little bit windy, and then you enter the pass, the Mount McKinley Pass, to get up north towards Fairbanks. We landed in Fairbanks. Weather was okay. And then we left Fairbanks the next day to fly back towards the Yukon, and we landed where I had my short stint in 1978, the airstrip. It's called Busby's Airstrip near Harding Lake, Alaska. It's not on the map. Right on the Richardson Highway.
Was Fairbanks your northernmost point?
Yep. Yeah. No, Eagle.
Eagle.
Eagle, actually. Eagle was the most northern point. And then some guys showed up, and I told them that I used to be there 45 years ago, and they gave me their ATV. It's still the same mess as 45 years ago. Nightmare. Being Swiss, you know, clean and order and separating stuff, that was a little bit hard for me. So when they filled up the oil in the airplane, they just threw the oil into the bush. For me, as a Swiss guy, it's I have a hard time with that, because I really like to have it nice and clean and in order and take care of nature. Beautiful sight en route to Tok, flying down the Alaska Highway. So just look at the beautiful weather. So that's the route we took from down here. I took the picture about here, down Tok, Beaver Creek, down to Whitehorse. That's Fairbanks. And Eagle would be up there. There's Chicken. Eagle is here, I'm sorry. That's Eagle. That's about a little bit the map of everything. So now we were flying back to Canada. The same thing, phone calls.
What's the green area on that map?
go back.
On the right, lower left, forest.
That's British Columbia. You mean here?
No,
Lower left.
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 Oh, that's the Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve. And that's where we were. That's where we were. That's where Chisana is, with where we visited my friend Arthur. Arthur is down here. So you see the Canadian customs, the American customs. And then we got this clip. Explosion destroys Talkeetna food truck. We had lunch there 3 days before, but nobody got hurt. That was also a thing. The food truck where we had lunch in Talkeetna exploded. Thank God, 3 days after we left. But thank God nobody got hurt. That was a funny little things coming in. It scared the hell out of us, you know. So these are the forest fires which posed a lot of problems in Canada. That's also a reason we had a very hard time finding hotel rooms in Canada, because of the forest fire. The government evacuated all the people and put them in hotels, and we had a heck of a time finding a hotel room. Very, very hard time. Sometimes we had to call 11 hotels until the number 11 had a room available for us. And that's Northway, Alaska, southbound, flying towards Canada to do customs in Canada. Now again, look at the weather now, how beautiful it is now. Then we did customs, the Canada customs. So Axel called, they gave him a authorization number, he was able to stay, no problem. I called and she said, you have to get out of your airplane and walk over to the customs office at the highway. Okay, so I took my passport and all the paperwork, and I had to walk over the Alaska highway behind that building. It was a walk like from here to my hangar number 5. So it was a 10-minute walk, I don't know, 5-minute walk. And I went in there, and what do you want? I said, well, I just landed my private airplane, and they want me to call you, to say hello to you. Okay, well, give us your passport. For 20 minutes, they looked at my passport, asked a whole bunch of questions, and then they said, you're good to go, you're released. So, okay, thank you. Easy. I had my ETA ready, my electronic travel authorization number. And then we continued. So look at the weather now. And 1 hour later, 35 knots wind. That was the biggest wind, the strongest wind I ever had in my life, landing my Pacer. Thank God it wasn't a crosswind. I landed and my airplane took off again, and I landed again, and then it took off again without me doing anything. It was so much wind. And then when I landed the third time, I stepped on the brake and slowed down to 2 miles an hour. And my worries was when I was turning off the runway that the wind will lift up my wing. I was worried like crazy about this. I was really worried with that wind. And then I wanted to stay there. I said, you know, just let's stay there. But they locked the building. We could have slept on our mattresses, which we had in the airplane. But they locked the building since 9/11. You cannot go anywhere. I said, well, let's set up the tent. And Axel said, no, let's try going. Let's go. Okay. Then I filled up my bladder tanks because there was no fuel because of these headwinds, which were not forecast. I was slowly getting short of fuel, so I had my bladder tanks. I put in 10 gallons of fuel. I got 2 bladder tanks, filled up the tank, and it was cold as hell. And then we diverted to Silver City. The weather was so bad over the Kluane Lake, we couldn't make it. And then there was an airport there, Silver City, Yukon. They have a tour operator with 2 airplanes, and they do glacier tours. So we landed there at 9 o'clock in the evening, and there were some people there standing, and then the manager of the airport, a lady, she said, okay guys, you can sleep in our log cabin here. It's an unheated log cabin, very romantic. Of course you can see I took the small bed, but it was 9 o'clock in the evening, 10 past 9, 9:30, cold as hell, raining. We had to tie down the airplane in driving rain, cold as hell, and no dinner, of course. So we had a granola bar for dinner and a glass of Perrier water. That was our dinner. Freezing cold. A nice view. Axel took a picture of me in the bed. It was just freezing. Incredible. And I hung up my clothes up there. The next morning they were still cold and almost frozen. So the next morning, snow on the mountains, it snowed. I was so cold, I said, I want to go into my airplane, start up the engine, because my engine gets warm and produces heat. I was looking forward to get warm in my airplane. I was shivering, I was so cold. It was 34 degrees Fahrenheit. And then, trying to start up the engine, wouldn't start. She didn't start. So my left mag failed. Took us a while to find out the left mag failed. In the middle of nowhere, in Silver City, Yukon, on the Kluane Lake, that's really what I needed. And then they told us there's a maintenance shop in Whitehorse, but Whitehorse is 1 hour by airplane away or 3 hours by car. So we left my airplane behind, and then I jumped in Axel's airplane, and he flew me to Whitehorse to talk to the maintenance people. And we went immediately to the maintenance guy and ordered a new mag. But in the Yukon, to get a new mag, any spare part, it's not like here UPS, FedEx, where it comes within 24 hours. It takes 4 days. So we waited 4 days in Whitehorse. I had to wait, until that spare part came. And I was pretty, well, how do you say, no, not very happy. By the way, this forest fire is damage on the way to Whitehorse. And then I went with 2 mechanics back to Silver City, 3 hour drive. And they looked at my airplane, if it's not the mag, and they changed the starter, but it turned out it is the mag. So it was 3 hours driving up there, 2 hours working on my airplane, 3 hours driving back, and Axel was in the city waiting in Whitehorse for news. So we knew that's it. So I spent a lot of money just having the mechanics drive 3 hours up, 3 hours back with me, and then back to Whitehorse. And then we knew it is the mag. I have to wait until the mag is here. And so while I was up there, worried as hell about my airplane being stranded in the middle of nowhere, Axel had a surprise for me in Whitehorse. He invited me to a cabaret show. That was pretty funny. And at the end of the show, we were allowed to take pictures with the ladies. So you see, I actually do cheer up a little bit. And then, of course, I needed a beer at the redneck bar right next door. Can you see all the rifles up there?
Yeah.
And that was a really redneck bar. I mean, half of the people were alcoholics, and it was funny. I mean, I laughed. I mean, when you get an adventure like this, it was funny. And then that's the mechanic. Axel had to leave because he had urgent business to do in Vancouver, so he had to leave me behind. So I was all by myself. And then I had a hotel problem. Like no hotels are available because of these forest fires. The hotels were full with evacuees, Canadians. And then the chief mechanic, the owner of the mechanic shop, invited me to stay at his house. And here he's barbecuing for us with his family. It's a Vermont casting barbecue. I had to take a picture of this. And that's him. That's him and his wife. They gave me one of these Mexican ponchos. It's not an Indian, it's Mexican ponchos. Everybody thinks it's Indian. No, they have a second home in Mexico, and they gave me these ponchos because it was getting cold in the evening. And then they took me around to Fairbanks, the seaplane base on Lake Schwatka, I think it is. And here is the road and air maintenance van who, saved my airplane with the mag. And then on Sunday morning, on Saturday evening, the mag arrived, and then on Sunday, Justin drove with me to Silver City to change the mag. Here we are, the weather looks beautiful. And then I flew back to Whitehorse, and he drove back to Whitehorse. And then I spent the night at his house, and I spent the night in this the motorhome. You know, he had a motorhome in the backyard, so that was very nice of me. I had my own room, and I'd taken the shower at his house, but sleeping in the motorhome.
How was his
So-
coffee?
That was his. Say again?
How was his coffee?
No coffee at all.
No?
But they took me. No, that was again one morning with no coffee. The last morning was no coffee. The other mornings in Whitehorse they have a very nice coffee place. But on my very last day, no coffee. And then I finally left Whitehorse, and the next day, here it's all by myself, Tesnet Lake, Yukon. Then entering British Columbia, very dramatic mountains. And then, thank God, I'm IFR, and my airplane is IFR. The visibility got really bad with forest fires. And then I kept on going. Then I was stranded in Fort St. John, not in Fort St. John, in Grand Prairie, Alberta, 3 days with bad weather. Like on the way up, 3 days in bad weather, Grand Prairie. And after I survived this, kept on going, and then it looks nice, the 26th of August, North Dakota, beautiful. And just as a small side note, these were my notes I was doing with the miles, my planning, alternate routing, how do I do. So I was always preparing every single day how I'm gonna fly the next day. And now we're getting close to home. A night stop in Brainerd, Minnesota. Just landed before they closed down, and they got me a taxi to a hotel. And then I spent the night in a very bad hotel, I have to admit. But I booked it online. What shall I do? I wanted to go home now. And then the next morning, I went to the reception. I was the only guy without a car because I flew in. So I asked the guy, can you please call me a taxi to the airport? And he said, don't you have a phone? Very rude guy. So that was a little bit a bad experience in Brainerd. He was actually getting aggressive because I needed a taxi. I said, I'm sorry, I'm from Switzerland. I'm traveling through Canada, United States. I don't know my way around here. I need somebody to help me get a taxi and then to the airport. So that was a little bit a bad thing, which belongs to a trip like this. You don't have only nice experiences, you also have bad experiences, to be honest. And then I fulfilled my goal on that day and landed in Michigan to see my very good friends, John and Lois. He has a private airstrip behind his house. So that was really nice to see my friends again. And then I felt almost like being back home, you know, back in the United States. Of course, coming back in the US from Canada, boom, my ForeFlight works, I get radar pictures, I get weather information, everything like this goes up. So thank God back in the United States. Okay, and then I arrived home on the very last day of August. And these are all the bags. Look how much stuff I had to stuff in my airplane. And this is my last slide here. Can you read this?
Read it for us.
Okay, it's Snoopy. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting bored. Sometimes I think I've seen everything, and then they see Snoopy with the pilot hat. I was wrong. That's the first time I've ever seen a bush pilot. That's it, guys. Thank you. My ETA is right on, 1 hour. It's 18:57.
What happened to Axel after he left Vancouver?
Axel went to Vancouver and then he came, we met back in Sugarbush. We met back here together. Then he flew to Montreal. He had some business to do with his airplane in Montreal. He bought floats. And then he came back to Sugarbush. And now he is back in Europe. He put his airplane is down in Saratoga Springs. So we met back here. We were just offset for like 1 week. We didn't see each other. Any other questions?
When are you going to get a green card?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, Trish.
Where is Dave? Oh, Dave. No,